The door opened, and there she was, beaming. Not just smiling, but radiant, like she was carrying sunlight inside her. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes glittering, and her voice bubbled over with excitement before she had even fully stepped in. "You won't believe it," she said, dropping her bag by the door and kicking off her heels in one smooth motion. "Guess who's getting married?" She didn't wait for me to guess. "Sophie. Can you believe it? She finally said yes to Daniel, after all these years." Sophie. An old friend from her college days. We had met her a few times over the years, at birthdays, dinner parties, random nights out. She was the kind of woman who laughed loudly, talked with her hands, and always had an elaborate story to tell. I liked her well enough. "That's great," I said, closing my laptop. "When's the wedding?" 3 months from now. And guess what? She invited both of us. She clapped her hands together, grinning like a kid unwrapping a gift. Her excitement was contagious, but something about it felt slightly too much. Or maybe I was just tired. "That's nice," I said, stretching my arms. "Where is it?" "Lakeview Resort. It's going to be beautiful." She's planning this whole outdoor ceremony, floral arrangements, live music. Ugh, it's going to be a dream. I nodded, watching her as she spoke, the way her body practically hummed with energy. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen her this elated. Not even on our own anniversary. And then she dropped it, casual as anything, like she was mentioning the weather. "Oh, by the way, I already found a dressmaker. Custom design. She's supposed to be amazing. I went in today for a consultation, and I have another fitting scheduled for next week." It was an innocent statement. Completely normal. But for some reason, it sat weird in my stomach. "Already?" I asked, frowning slightly. "You didn't even tell me you were looking." She shrugged. "Sophie recommended her. Said she's the best in the city. And I figured, why wait?" I nodded slowly. "Fair enough." It wasn't like she needed my permission to get a dress. But still, something about the way she was brushing it off, the way she said it like it was no big deal, made me hesitate. "You didn't even want to check out other places first?" She laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "Babe, trust me, I don't need to. The designer is incredible. And besides, it's already in motion." Something about that phrase, "already in motion," made the back of my neck prickle. "Okay," I said, keeping my tone light. "When's the next fitting?" "Next Friday. Around noon. A week from then." I filed that away. She was still grinning, practically glowing. And yet, I couldn't shake this tiny, gnawing unease inside me. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was overthinking. But still. Over the next few days, I started noticing small things. Little shifts. She was on her phone more. Not in a suspicious way. Nothing obvious. Just present, but distracted. Checking something, smiling at messages she didn't share. One night, as we lay in bed, she turned away from me, her phone screen casting a soft glow against the sheets. I heard her typing, pausing, then deleting, then typing again. "Everything okay?" I asked. She locked the screen immediately, rolling onto her back with a forced casualness. "Yeah. Just talking to Sophie about wedding stuff." I nodded, but I didn't say anything. And then there was her mood. She was happier. Almost giddy. The kind of lightness that felt new. Like she was carrying around some secret source of joy that had nothing to do with me. And then there was the way she looked at herself in the mirror. Longer, more thoughtful, like she was seeing herself through someone else's eyes. That Friday, I happened to work from home. She didn't know that. At 11:30 a.m., she stepped out of the bedroom, dressed effortlessly chic. Hair done, makeup subtle but polished. She was wearing a blouse I hadn't seen in a while, the neckline slightly lower than usual. Her perfume hung in the air, faint but noticeable. "You look nice," I said, watching her from the kitchen. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thanks. It's just a fitting. Just a fitting." She grabbed her bag, checked herself in the mirror one last time, then headed out. The door clicked shut behind her, and the house fell into silence. I stayed where I was for a moment, staring at the empty space she had just occupied. Something about the air felt different, like the energy in the room had shifted. I exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of my neck, trying to shake off the feeling. It was just a fitting. That's what I told myself. I turned back to my laptop, opening the document I had been working on, but my eyes skimmed over the words without absorbing them. My mind was elsewhere. I tried to brush it off. I tried to remind myself that I was being ridiculous. But then, as I sat there, the little details started coming back. Small things I had ignored or brushed aside over the past few weeks. The extra time she spent getting ready. The way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The lingering glances in the mirror. The way she hummed under her breath like she had a song playing in her head that I couldn't hear. It wasn't just excitement over a dress. It was something else. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to quiet the voice in my head that kept whispering, "Pay attention. Something's off." I shook my head, forcing a chuckle at my own paranoia. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was letting my imagination run away with me. But deep down, in some quiet part of me I wasn't ready to acknowledge, I felt it. Something had shifted between us. And I had no idea what was coming. I never considered myself a jealous man. Suspicious? Maybe. Paranoid? Not at all. But over the next few days, I felt something unraveling, a quiet, gnawing feeling that something was happening right under my nose, just out of sight. It wasn't just in my head. I could see it. The way she moved around the house, lighter on her feet. The way her phone never left her side, even when she showered. The way she seemed more alive than I had seen her in years. And then there was the dress. I had never cared much about fashion, but suddenly, it seemed to be the center of my wife's world. Every day, she had something new to say about it. The material, the way it would fit, the adjustments, the delicate work being done by hand. I asked once, just in passing, "So, how was the fitting?" She paused, just for a fraction of a second, before answering, "Good. The dress is coming along perfectly. Too perfectly." I watched her closely as she said it. No extra details. No complaints. No stories about the designer or the boutique or the process. That wasn't like her. My wife loved talking about things in excruciating detail. Instead, she changed the subject. Quickly. And that's when I knew. She was hiding something. I wasn't the kind of man who went through his wife's things. But suspicion changes you. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling that same restless energy under my skin. A thought formed in my mind, dark and unwelcome, but impossible to shake. I knew her passcode. She hadn't changed it. My heart pounded as I reached over, carefully lifting her phone off the nightstand. I held my breath as the screen unlocked. Nothing obvious at first. But then I saw it. A message thread. Unfamiliar name. No profile picture. Just initials. RM. I tapped on it. At first, nothing seemed suspicious. The messages were clean. Normal. But as I scrolled further up, I saw something that made my stomach drop. She had deleted texts. Gaps in the conversation. Responses that didn't match the messages before them. Long stretches of silence where I knew something had been said but was no longer there. And the way she replied, short, clipped answers, sometimes just a single word. Like she was hiding something in plain sight. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I could wake her up. I could shake her until she told me the truth. I could demand to know who the hell RM was and why she had to delete messages from him. But I didn't. Instead, I placed the phone back exactly as it was, turned onto my side, and stared into the darkness. If she was hiding something, I needed to know what before I confronted her. So I waited. A week passed. She had another fitting scheduled, and this time, I paid attention. I watched her that morning as she got ready. It wasn't just the usual picking an outfit and heading out the door. She was preparing. She stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, checking herself from different angles. Her hand brushed over her stomach, her waist. She smoothed down the fabric of her blouse, tilting her head slightly, eyes focused. Then she opened her dresser drawer. She rummaged through her lingerie, taking her time, picking pieces up, examining them, then putting them back. She finally settled on something. Black lace. I swallowed hard, keeping my expression neutral as I sat on the bed, pretending to be engrossed in my phone. "You're dressing up just for a fitting?" I asked casually. She turned, flashing me a small, effortless smile. "It's just underwear, babe. I just want to feel good in the dress, that's all." I nodded, said nothing else. She left. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the door. The next fitting came a week later. This time, I didn't just watch her prepare. I studied every detail. She showered before leaving, which wasn't unusual, but the way she took her time, the way she stood in front of the mirror with that same look, like she was anticipating something, made my blood run cold. Then she opened the drawer again. Only this time, she didn't take anything. She didn't choose any underwear at all. She wore a loose-fitting dress, flowing, easy to put on and easy to slip out of. And then she walked out the door, completely unaware that I had just seen everything I needed to see. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands clasped together, my mind racing through everything. Every detail I had ignored, every excuse she had made, every piece of evidence I now had. She was cheating on me. I knew it now. I felt it. But instead of anger, there was only cold certainty. I could have confronted her that night. I could have laid everything on the table, demanded the truth, thrown everything we had into chaos. But I didn't. Because I wanted more than just suspicion. I wanted proof. I wanted to know how far this had gone. So I waited. I let her believe I suspected nothing. And I made a plan. Because the next time she walked out that door, thinking I was just another clueless husband, thinking she had covered her tracks well enough, I would be right behind her. I sat on the bed, waiting. The room was dimly lit, the evening sun casting long shadows across the walls. I could hear the faint hum of traffic outside, the occasional sound of distant voices drifting up from the street. But inside, it was silent. Too silent. I checked the time again. She was late. Not by much. Just 20, maybe 30 minutes. But enough to make my skin crawl. Enough to remind me that this wasn't just a dress fitting. I heard her car pull into the driveway. The front door opened, then closed. And then, her voice. Light. Cheerful. Overjoyed. "Baby, you won't believe it." I clenched my jaw. I already knew what she was going to say. She walked into the bedroom, a large white box in her hands, her eyes glowing with excitement. She looked euphoric, like she had just won the lottery. "It's done," she said breathlessly. "The dress is perfect. It's everything I wanted." I forced a smile. "Let me see." She hesitated for a second, just a second, before setting the box down on the bed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she untied the ribbon, lifted the lid, and pulled out the dress. It was stunning, elegant, the kind of craftsmanship you could only get from the best. And I knew, just by looking at it, that it wasn't cheap. I ran my fingers over the fabric. The quality was undeniable. The embroidery, the detailing, it was luxury. My salary wouldn't have covered half of it. "How much did this cost?" I asked, my voice calm. She laughed, brushing the question aside. "Oh, don't worry about that. I got a discount. First-time customer deal." I lifted my gaze to hers. A discount. She nodded quickly. Yeah. A huge one, actually. It's fine, really. But it wasn't fine. Because discounts like that didn't exist. Not for a dress like this. And she knew I knew. Try it on, I said. Her hands stiffened around the fabric. She blinked. Right now. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice even. I want to see how you look in it. The hesitation lasted just a second, but it was there. I saw it. She hesitated because she knew. She knew she wasn't wearing any underwear. And in that moment, I saw everything. I saw the moment of panic behind her eyes. The quick calculation she was making. The realization that she had been caught, that she had made a mistake. Go on, I said, my heart pounding. She wet her lips, gripping the dress a little too tightly. Then, slowly, she shook her head. I need to take a shower, she said. I exhaled sharply, nodding. Right. I let a beat of silence hang between us before I spoke again. You didn't wear anything to your fitting, did you? The smile vanished. Her entire face froze. For a moment, she just stared at me. Not shocked, not confused, just blank. Like a machine processing too much information at once. And in that moment I knew. How did you get that discount? I asked, my voice suddenly sharp. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. She wasn't even going to deny it. She wasn't going to beg, wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to try to make me believe some stupid lie. She was just standing there, silent. I stood up. So that's how much we were worth. My voice shook. That's what our marriage was worth to you? A discount. She swallowed hard. Still nothing. I felt something snap inside me. You slept with him, didn't you? My voice was raw now, unrestrained. Jesus Christ, you slept with the guy who made your dress. Her throat bobbed, but she didn't speak. And somehow, that was worse than if she had admitted it. If she had cried, if she had screamed, if she had thrown out some pathetic excuse, maybe I could have held on to some fraction of control. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at me, not with guilt, not with regret, but with indifference. And then, in the softest voice, she said, if I hadn't gotten the discount, I wouldn't have been able to afford the dress. I staggered back. It felt like she had punched me. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I had prepared myself for betrayal, for lies, for some desperate attempt to make me believe she was still the woman I had married. But this was worse than I had ever imagined. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had sold us out. For a dress. I laughed. It was bitter, empty. Not a laugh of humor. A laugh of disbelief. Wow, I muttered. That's it? That's really all you have to say? She didn't move. She just stood there, the dress still clenched in her hands, like it was the only thing that mattered. And maybe, to her, it was. I shook my head. My whole body was buzzing with something. Anger, heartbreak, hatred. I couldn't even tell them apart anymore. But I knew one thing. I was done. I grabbed my jacket from the chair, shoving my arms into the sleeves. Her eyes flicked up, but she didn't stop me. Of course, she didn't. Because she didn't care. I walked to the door, my steps heavy, my heart pounding against my ribs. I paused for a second, my hand on the knob, staring at the wood grain in front of me. I had so many things I wanted to say. But none of them mattered anymore. So I just whispered, "You ruined us for a dress." Then I opened the door. And I walked out. The cold night air hit me as soon as I stepped outside. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. Not in that house. Not in that room where the smell of her perfume still lingered in the air, where the ghost of her betrayal clung to the walls. I walked. No direction, no purpose. Just movement. Just the sound of my footsteps hitting the pavement, the rhythmic pounding of my heart like a drum in my ears. I had left. I had actually left. I should have felt free. Relieved. Instead, I felt empty. Everything about tonight had been inevitable. The signs had been there. The distance, the late nights, the secret smiles she thought I didn't notice. And still, some part of me had believed, hoped, that when I finally confronted her, she would break down. She would fight for us. But she hadn't. She had looked me in the eye and admitted to selling us out like she was discussing a grocery list. And that was the moment I knew. I had been holding on to something that didn't exist anymore. I found myself at a 24-hour diner. The kind with flickering neon signs and the lingering smell of burnt coffee and cheap grease. I slid into a booth in the corner, rubbing a hand over my face. My body felt heavy, like the weight of the past few hours had finally settled into my bones. The waitress came over, barely glancing at me as she poured a cup of coffee. "Rough night?" she asked. I huffed out something that might have been a laugh. "Yeah, you could say that." She nodded, like she'd heard 100 stories just like mine. I stared down at the steaming coffee, watching the surface ripple slightly. This was real. It was over. I had spent years with her, years, building something I thought was solid, something that could withstand time, change, hardship. I had loved her in ways she would never fully understand. And now, it was gone. I could still picture the way she had stood there, clutching that damn dress, more concerned about her perfect outfit than the wreckage of our marriage. Had I ever really known her? Or had I just loved the version of her I thought was real? The anger came in waves. One second, I felt cold, detached. The next, I wanted to slam my fist against the table, throw the coffee cup against the wall, scream at the universe for being so goddamn cruel. How dare she? How dare she take everything we had and reduce it to a discount? How dare she stand there with no remorse, no regret, nothing? I clenched my fists, breathing hard through my nose. But the truth was, I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself. For missing the signs. For believing in her long after she had stopped believing in me. For letting myself be the fool. I squeezed my eyes shut. The memories came fast and sharp. The way she used to trace circles on my skin with her fingertips. The way she used to steal my hoodies even though she had dozens of her own. The way she used to laugh, really laugh, like the world was too small to hold her joy. Was any of it real? Or had it all been leading to this? I sat there for hours. Just me, the coffee, and the realization that everything had changed. I had lost her. But more than that, I had lost the version of myself that believed we were unbreakable. And yet, in the quiet of that diner, surrounded by strangers who didn't know my name or my story, I felt something I hadn't expected. She was gone. But I was still here. I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to chase after her, beg for an explanation, demand an apology she wasn't willing to give. She had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I left the diner just as the sun was beginning to rise. The world looked different in the early morning light. Quiet. Almost peaceful. I should have felt better. Lighter. Like I was stepping into something new. But the truth was, the pain was still there. The scar was still fresh. I knew it wouldn't fade overnight. I knew there would be moments, days, weeks, maybe even years, where I would think about her, about us, about the life we had built and lost. But for the first time, I also knew this. I was going to be okay. I took one last deep breath, then started walking. Away from the past. And toward whatever came next. I didn't hesitate when I opened the front door. This was my house. My home. The place I had inherited. The place I had let her turn into something that didn't even feel like mine anymore. Not anymore. The moment I stepped inside, she was there. Waiting. She must have heard my key turn in the lock because she was already standing in the middle of the living room, her arms crossed. The dress, the same damn dress she had traded our marriage for, was nowhere in sight. "You came back," she said softly. I said nothing. I closed the door behind me, walked past her into the kitchen, grabbed a glass from the cabinet, and filled it with water. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. I wouldn't let her see how much she had broken me. I made a mistake, she said behind me. I see that now. I took a sip, my grip tightening around the glass. A mistake. That was what she called it. Not a betrayal. Not a deliberate decision. Just a mistake. I turned to face her. She looked different now. Not radiant, not euphoric. Just small. Her shoulders slightly hunched, her hands gripping her arms. As if she had just realized that everything she had gambled away was never coming back. I just wanted to look good for you, she said, her voice almost pleading. I wanted to feel beautiful again. I studied her. Was she serious? Did she really not understand what she had done? I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my jaw. You wanted to feel beautiful, I repeated. So you sold our marriage for a discount? Her face twisted. That's not fair. No, I cut her off. What's not fair is me standing here, listening to you try to rewrite what happened. She opened her mouth, then shut it. I let the silence stretch, let her sit in it. Let her realize that no matter what she said, nothing would change. Then I finally spoke. While you are preparing for Sophie's wedding, I said quietly, I will be preparing for my own divorce. Her breath hitched. For the first time, real panic flickered in her eyes. You don't mean that. I laughed under my breath, shaking my head. Get out, I said. Her lips parted slightly, as if she couldn't process what I had just said. This is my house, I continued, my voice steady. I inherited it from my parents. You have 1 week to take your things and leave. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just done. You can't just. I can, I interrupted. And I am. I walked past her, heading for the stairs. Where are you going? She asked, her voice breaking. To bed, I said. For the first time in years, I think I'll finally sleep well. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. No scent of coffee brewing. No faint hum of music from the bathroom. No one waiting for me in the kitchen. And for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt free. I spent the next few days reclaiming my space. I started with the bedroom, our bedroom. I stripped the sheets, tossed out the pillows she had picked, packed up everything that felt like hers. Then the living room. The framed photos of us. Gone. The decorations she had insisted on, out. Every trace of her, every piece of the life we had built together, I erased it. And with every item I removed, I felt lighter. I reached out to friends I hadn't spoken to in months, maybe years. Not because I didn't care, but because I had let myself become isolated. Now, I needed them. I met up with Alex, an old college friend. We grabbed drinks, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed. Really laughed. I dusted off my old guitar, one that had been sitting untouched for too long, and started playing again. The chords were rough at first, my fingers stiff, but it came back to me. I went to the gym for the first time in years, pushing my body until my muscles ached. Until I felt alive. I took a road trip, alone. I drove for hours, music blasting, windows down. I didn't have a destination. I didn't need one. The point was just to move forward. One night, I found myself back at the house, sitting on the porch with a drink in my hand, watching the city lights in the distance. And that's when it hit me. The ache was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't the raw, open wound it had been. It was a scar, a reminder of something painful, but also of something I had survived. For the first time, I saw the affair for what it really was. Yes, it had hurt. Yes, it had shattered everything I thought I knew about love, about trust. But it had also given me something. A second chance. A chance to start over. To rebuild. To rediscover who I was before her. I exhaled, staring at the horizon, at the endless stretch of possibilities that lay ahead. The past was behind me, and the future, it was mine to create. The day the divorce papers were finalized, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. She was gone. But I was still here. Stronger. Wiser. Free. And for the first time in a long time, I knew this was just the beginning.